Hello, contractors, and welcome to Toolbox for the Trades. My name is Jackie Aubel, and joining me once again is my incredible co-host, Amanda Salvatore. Amanda, you've hosted the last 3 weeks of Toolbox for the Trades. How does it feel?
It feels really great. I have been enjoying my time here.
I have got to say, I've loved your episodes even more than I've loved getting to take the last month off of podcasting. You've got a great episode for us today. Can you tell me a bit about it?
Today, I speak with Stephen Harper, President and CEO of Spectrum Building Services of America and CEO Life Lessons, which is an online video resource where he talks best practices. We discuss his 25 years of commercial clean industry experience, and he shares what he has done with his business to take it to the next level.
Amazing. I cannot wait to listen. As a heads up, I'll be returning as podcast host next week. And then Amanda, you and I will take turns hosting moving forward. How does that sound?
Sounds like that is the plan you came up with as my boss, and I am happy to implement it.
So glad that you're on board. All right, guys. So without further ado, let's jump right into today's episode.
Stephen Harper, you are the president and CEO at Spectrum Building Services of America and CEO Life Lessons. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. I'm really excited to dive into your 25 years of experience in the industry.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to it. This is exciting for me.
First and foremost, we always like to start with a little icebreaker, an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. And I know you're a foodie. I couldn't help myself. What is the most memorable dish you've ever had at a restaurant, and what made it so special?
You know, I've been blessed with having had a lot of really, really fine meals. The ones that stand out to me the most, it almost isn't about the food. It's when they take you on what I like to call a food journey, where you try different things and they bring different tastes and textures and combinations that you haven't heard. And so it's never about a dish, it's about the journey. So I've had a few food journeys I thought were amazing. One was in Paris, this place called Apicius. It was probably the best restaurant I've ever been to, and it was just amazing. And I couldn't tell you what I had there, but I can tell you everything was amazing.
I love that. I do. I've very often people will mention the French Laundry or something like that. And having an experience like that, a tasting experience like that just seems incredibly exciting to me. So I'm on board. So any references or any suggestions you have, send them my way because I'm here for it.
Awesome.
Now, I know I could talk food with you all day. I really could, especially with us both being in the Los Angeles area. But We're here to talk about the commercial clean industry, obviously. So how did you find yourself here?
You know, essentially, I left corporate America after a stint working for companies like FedEx and Gateway and Capital One and Disney and all that stuff. And I just decided that I wanted to start my own business. And I tried to look at something that sort of played into the things that I was good at and candidly avoided the things that I'm not great at. I'm not great at sales and marketing. I'm not a glad hander. I don't really, I'm not a person who likes to be out there all the time. But what I do like to do is focus on operational execution. I'm very good at finance, very good at sort of making sure that process orientation. So the thing I liked about Janitorial is that it's a recurring revenue business. The nice thing about it is that if you do a good job, people will send you checks every month. This is an amazing thing to me. And you don't have to keep selling. You just have to do a really good job and do great customer service. And so I think because of that experience, and I'd actually had some experience when I was at Disney. I was a hotel general manager for part of the time I was there. And so I managed what was at the time the largest resort at Walt Disney World. And I had a staff of about 700 housekeepers. I really got to know the ins and outs of facility maintenance and infrastructure and taking care of a hotel. And that really sort of played into the janitorial piece and managing a large staff. I was like, you know what, I think there's something that I really enjoy. And plus I really enjoy connecting with the janitors and really sort of helping them make the best out of their lives and create a great place to work. So that's how I ended up in this industry, actually.
I didn't realize that when you were at Disney, you were running a team of 700 people. That's really incredible. I know that you've mentioned FedEx, Disney, Capital One. You have all of this experience to influence your leadership style. What have you taken from those companies that has really lent itself to your leadership style and your business strategies?
It's interesting. The very first management job I ever got was actually at FedEx. When you become a manager at FedEx, at least back in the 90s, you met with the CEO, Fred Smith, and he would sort of imbue upon you his philosophy of management. And he said, you know what? I'd rather fire a manager in the morning for not upholding our people's service profit philosophy than have a cup of coffee in the morning. He says, and I really love my cup of coffee in the morning. And so it's this idea that you have to treat people with respect and dignity. You have to balance people, servicing the customers, and profit together, that you can't do one at the expense of the other. That really sort of was my grounding, as it were. When I moved on to other companies like Disney, especially as well, where I really learned about, really show quality and excellence of service and that kind of stuff, that really melding those things together and finding ways to be, someone who can work well with people. Disney is a great place to learn how to relate to people. FedEx is very much about getting the job done, command and control, execution, and Disney was much more about relationships. So really putting those two things together were probably, I would say, the two biggest influences on my leadership style.
I know when we previously spoke, you were talking about certain lessons that you have learned through these companies. You're talking about customer service specifically with Disney. What have you learned about the customer, and how do you approach your customers?
The interesting thing is that when people give you their money, they're buying into what you promised them. Their hopes and dreams for whatever that money is they're trading their money for an experience or something of value that you're giving them. And I think just for me, I've always felt like if you're going to take someone's money, you better damn well give them what it is that they ask for. Because if not, they're not going to come back. And worse, they're going to tell other people that you don't do that. And so your reputation can take years to build and can be destroyed in a few instances of really not performing as you said you would. And so just understanding that customers are people, just like you and me. They've got problems, they've got issues. And especially if you're a janitorial company, the last thing people want to do is have to deal with their janitorial. What they want to know is if they have a problem, are you going to take care of it for them? Or are you going to try to avoid it? Are you going to try to slough them off? Are you really going to care about solving their problems? And so I think that the thing that I really try to imbue in my team is that one of our number one values is just care, really caring about the customer and knowing that because we have customers, it makes all of our livelihoods possible. And I think just that relationship, and isn't that I think the customer is everything, but they're really important because without customers, you don't have a business.
I'd love to dive into CEO life lessons. Like I said before, you have 25 years of experience. You have worked for all of these incredible companies who deliver time and time again. So what is CEO life lessons? How have you come up with that concept, and what is your mission?
It came about because my oldest son would actually come over to my house sometimes. He'd bring some of his friends over. They would start talking about different things, and then I would start talking about different things I've learned in business. And they all kind of have this entrepreneur thing where they're trying to learn how to make their way in the world because they're in their 20s. And I was amazed that these young kids, first of all, gave a damn about anything I had to say. But two, their attention was very rapt when I were talking about things and just share with them, hey, here's what I learned about this. Here's where I saw this happen. And here's the example. And this is why this is important. They said, you should do this, where you show this to other people. And I started thinking about it. I said, what is this really about? I said, this is really about the life lessons that you learn as a CEO, not so much the things you learn in business school, because I had been to business school and I'd worked for other companies. But when you're a CEO, it's a different game. And you have to care about different things. There are things that no one is going to tell you that you'd have to learn. Like there are places that you learn where the bodies are buried, that no one ever tells you when you're in business. And even though I felt well prepared to come to the janitorial industry, I didn't know the industry itself. I knew about business. I knew about a lot of things, but I didn't know this industry. And really what my intent was to help other janitorial leaders, especially, but other leaders, sort of generally understand the things that you have to look out for. These are important as you're running a business, because there were things that you would think people would know, but they don't. I knew profit and loss and your balance sheet. I knew all that stuff inside out. But what I had never had to do in a big company was forecast cash flow and manage cash. Because big companies have plenty of cash. They don't have to manage cash. These have to manage profitability and make sure that they're making smart investments. But the number one thing I had to learn, biggest in entrepreneur and small business owners, that without cash, you die. And that you've got to make sure that you're managing cash with the same diligence that you manage profitability, same way you manage your debt, same way you manage everything else. You have to be really focused on making sure that the money comes in as it's supposed to.
I kind of want to dive into this idea of managing cash. What are some other actionable items that people can take away from this podcast that you can advise them on about managing cash?
The first thing I would say is make sure that you build yourself a cash flow document where you can understand how you forecast your cash flow. Because what I've found that happens is that sometimes things come up, things don't go the way they're supposed to, and a lot of times you don't know about it until it's too late. Whereas if you have a cash flow forecast, you can say, okay, I'm expecting to make this much money. I'm expecting this much to come in. I'm expecting these expenditures to go out. And you can very easily see that if you've accounted for your expenditures that are going out and your cash coming in, you can see very quickly if and when you're going to have cash flow problems. Because as with a lot of the way business works, things don't come on an exact even schedule all the time. And you get to learn that you have to have some sort of buffer to understand that, hey, you know what? I need this much cash in the business at all times, because sometimes customers pay late. And payroll, unfortunately, comes on time. It does not skip a beat. Payroll is the most consistent thing that I've ever seen. And in our industry, it is also the biggest thing. So even though customers may pay plus or minus a week or two, or even a month in some instances, payroll comes religiously. And so you have to be prepared with cash when payroll comes. So if I were to, share one thing I think is just critically important, is just make sure that you have a good cash flow forecast and that you're checking to make sure that the money is coming in when it's supposed to. And if it doesn't, find out why. Sometimes customers don't understand that you're not a bank. We're a paying company, and most of our costs, and I've had to explain this to a few customers, most of our costs is paying employees. And if you don't pay us on time, we can't pay our employees, and that's going to cause problems for everybody. So it's really important for them to understand that we need to be paid on time. And that's why we have terms where we do. And it's the reason why we invoice and we follow up and we make sure that if there's a problem that we know about it. And, that has saved us more often than not, just being proactive about it.
I have to ask, being CEO in the commercial clean industry, what was the most surprising lesson that you have taken?
It's going to sound really strange, but just that employees have real lives. They have a life outside of this company. The things that I can do as a CEO to help make their lives better and make their lives work is time well spent for me. Whether it's ensuring that our employees have the ability to access cash because they're running a little short on a payroll, by offering them, a way where they can access part of their earned pay, by, even our professional staff. We went remote work during the pandemic and we never went back. And the reason why is because I realized that I have employees, a lot of them are parents, and they're not always able to come to an office every day, or it's really hard for them, or things happen and daycare and all sorts of stuff. And so what I found is that by being more considerate of what's going on in my employees' lives, that they care more about the company than they would otherwise. I'll tell you a funny story. I actually had one employee had a baby about 3 years ago. She literally was doing payroll while she was in labor.
As a person who has experienced labor, I am very, very impressed by that.
Because she was so committed to her job and ensuring that people got paid properly that she didn't take time. I mean, she could have taken maternity leave. She could have taken, you certainly offer people that, but because she was so committed to her job and she loved what she did, that she wanted to make sure that everything was okay. And even now, a lot of folks on our team, not only do we have work from home, but we have, for our leadership team, we have unlimited paid time off. So you can take off as much time as you want. And what we find is that giving people the flexibility to know that they can take time off and to take care of themselves and take care of their family. Our team, a lot of times, they work 5, 6, 7 days a week. They'll work nights, they'll work weekends. They take calls. They do things that if I didn't show them that I cared about them, that they would not do otherwise. They would be like, hey, I'm off work at 5 o'clock. I'm coming in at 8 or 9, and that's it. And again, I don't take advantage of it. I tell people, look, it's important for us to get our work done, but if you can find a way to get your work done, your schedule can be as flexible as you need to be to accommodate your family and your lives and, that kind of stuff. But, as long as we can take care of the customers, I think it's great. And I feel like that understanding of trying to make it a great place to work and be understanding of that our employees have things going on in their lives, that I think was probably the biggest lesson I learned as a CEO.
It sounds like you're cultivating a positive culture within your business. And I know that a lot of owners are looking to cultivate a culture that uplifts their employees. What should owners think about when it comes to building a strong culture?
I'll tell you, when I started Spectrum, I said one thing. I said, I want to create a company that I would want to work for myself as an employee. And if it's a place that I wouldn't want to work myself, then there's no point. And I started that from day one. And I said, okay, so what's something I would want if I was an employee? Well, you know what? I would want a bonus if I'm doing a good job. So from day one, we've had bonuses for frontline employees if they do a good job, because even if the company's not profitable, we've ensured that we sort of kept that going simply because we felt like it's not their fault that they're going to, it's my fault. It's their problem. I mean, they're doing their job. So as long as you're doing your job and we're doing what we need to do, then that's something that should be rewarded. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we have a very low turnover. The industry average turnover rate is well over 200%, and ours is under 30%.
Wow.
And it's because we make sure that we let our employees know that we care about them, not just through bonuses, but through understanding, accommodations, all the things that we do. We try to make sure that people have the tools and resources to do their job. We try to make sure they have the training and the knowledge and the support. And every one of our leaders and managers understands that they're not the boss of anybody. Their job is to serve the employees, just like my job is to serve them. And I always tell them, I said, look, my whole job is to make sure you have everything you need to do, support, training, resources, whatever, knowledge, expertise, whatever, to get your job done. And you need to do the same thing for the people that are relying on you, not that work for you, but the people that rely on you, because they rely on you to make it work for them.
This conversation is chock full of great advice, but there are a lot of people giving advice on the internet with podcasts and videos. How does CEO Life Lessons set itself apart from the rest of the noise?
Honestly, we have no money-making model, no revenue model whatsoever specifically. I don't do it to make money. I make enough money doing what I do right now. I do it to be helpful to the people who are where I was recently. They'll want to try to move to a different level. And I think that's always been sort of the guiding principle for me, is that even before I became a CEO, when I first graduated college, and I graduated in electrical engineering for my undergraduate degree. And I felt it was important to work with disadvantaged youth to help them learn how to become an engineer. Because one of the things that came up was that I didn't know what an engineer was when I graduated high school. I knew I was good at math, but I didn't know what engineers. I thought I had to do with a train or something. Because I came from a background in a place that nobody went to college. Nobody had engineers. So I've always had this thing of sort of giving back to those who have greatness in them, but they may not have knowledge or support or someone to just help them shed a light on sort of where they can go and what they can be. And I felt like the same thing with business. Like, I've been extremely, extremely blessed to go to one of the top business schools in the country, to work for some amazing companies, I mentioned, and now to run my own company. And I know that most people that are starting cleaning businesses don't have that benefit. And so to the extent that I can shed a light and be helpful and be a resource, I do. And it's one of the reasons why I speak at BSCAI every year. I do that not because I've got something to sell, because I don't have anything to sell. I'm not selling my peers. I'm just trying to help people. And so I think that if you ask me what the difference is, it's because my agenda is only to help people. It's not to make money. People ask me how I was going to monetize. I'm like, I'm not. That's not why I'm doing it.
How would you suggest owners to scale? I think that's really where a lot of owners sometimes find a struggle on how do I leverage, how do I level up and not be, a painful experience.
It's funny. Scaling is a hard thing. Let me just start with that. We're scaling right now even more. We're going to triple the size of our business over the next 8 or 9 months. The things that we have to do in order to do that, the groundwork was laid actually probably a couple of years ago. At the risk of sounding like I'm plugging something, part of it was actually finding the right technology and software and tools to actually provide you the ability to do it. Because one of the things as a leader to scale that you have to have is processes and information. One of the reasons, honestly, that we switched to Aspire from what we were at before was simply because we realized that the software platform that we had before, which was good for what it was back in the day, it did not have the ability for us to have the level of transparency into our costs, into our metrics, into the things that are important, as well as the integration with other best of breed platforms that allow us from our human resources platform. If we didn't have our human resource platform we have right now, we wouldn't be able to do this expansion that we're doing. If we didn't have, the ability to really see how we're doing, like on a daily basis, how are we doing? And again, to be able to put processes in place to support that, to me, those are the key things. Is you first got to make sure you map out all your key processes that generate revenue, that make money, that serve customers, and then have a way of measuring it to know if you're being successful or not. The only way to do that is to have the right infrastructure, as it were, to actually make that happen. And so we've been on this journey for about 3 years. We decided that we wanted to scale, because for a long time, I was really happy with my business the way it was. I'm like, I got an 8-figure business. And I'm good. I don't really need to do anything else. And then I realized that I needed to scale for the benefit of my team, because I had people who have dreams and goals and ambitions in their lives as well, as I said before, and I care about them. And I knew that if I didn't scale, I couldn't pay them enough to live their dreams and values. And so that was part of the reason that I started doing it. And so we started doing the process work. We started making sure that we had the technological infrastructure. And again, that's when we switched over to Aspire and started building out everything that we have now with that, and with the human resource system, and with the financial management, to where we can now say, okay, we can actually handle this. And it really is relatively straightforward, because we have a platform now. We have a technological platform for which we can scale. It really is about understanding their core processes, measuring it, and having the technology to be able to support it.
It really comes down to wanting to do right by your employees. And I think that is a really wonderful mission and a cool place to operate from. Is there any other lessons that you think are imperative to learn to be a good leader?
I think that the main thing for me is having clarity around why you do what you do. Most people will tell you what they do, or they'll tell you how they do it. But until you understand why they do it, it almost doesn't matter. And I think that I had to get to, even for myself, I had to get to the, why would I want to scale? I'm happy. I'm making enough money. I'm good. Why do I want to scale? And until I answered that question in a way that was really relevant to me, I couldn't even decide to scale. Once I knew that, okay, because I've got people who've been with me for some 2 decades, some a decade. And these people, they want to buy homes, they want to live their lives. They want to raise families. They want to send their kids to college. They want all stuff. And I'm like, I can't empower them to do that. And these are people who are providing me with a great lifestyle, because if they weren't doing their jobs, I wouldn't have my life. So it comes from this space of understanding where my well-being and happiness comes from, and saying, okay, you know what? In order for me to do that, then I got to do this. And then that why is what really got me on this path of actually scaling. And so I would say that that's probably true for things in general, Alicia. If you understand why you're doing it and you're really clear about that, and you can articulate that to people that you're working with, it makes all them norms. I tell you, if I told people I want to scale because I want to make more money, I don't think anybody would have bought into that dream.
It's very, it's not necessarily motivating for other people.
Now, mind you, it's a happy coincidence that I will make more money, but the purpose, but that was not the why.
Yeah, finding your mission is really important. I would agree with that. I hear that time and time again. And it's to feel authentic to yourself, not something that you think is what people want to hear, but something that really drives you from deep within. And then you're going to find success with that, which obviously you have. Stephen, this has been an incredible conversation with so many incredible pieces of advice. But before we go, is there anything that you wish we covered today?
You know, it's funny. It's actually more something that I wish I had covered. So I sort of threw in that comment that we're going to triple over the next 8 months, and I didn't give any context around it. Sure. And the interesting thing about that is that the reason that we're tripling in the next 8 months is because we have two of our biggest customers have decided that they trust us more than they trust other vendors, and they've asked us to take more business. So it's not because of marketing needs, it's not because of sales. And I asked them, you know, sort of, one of them anyway, I said, why do you guys do business with us? And the number one response was, because you do what you say you're going to do. And we trust you. And so I would just also tell people that if you can find ways to build trust with your customers and to act with integrity and be consistent with what you say and do, the rewards will come. Sometimes they don't always come when they're like one of the customers has been our customer for 10 years. And suddenly they just decided, you know what? They were going to do an RFP and they were going to get best pricing with everybody else stuff. And at the end of the day, they came back and not only said, not only you guys have what you have right now, but we want you any of our locations that you want throughout the country. And there are 400 of them. You can have as many as you want.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what's happening right now. And we had it happen with 2 different customers.
Congratulations. That's amazing. And it's all from you showing up and doing the work and doing it well. Stephen Harper, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. This was a great conversation.